Hello and welcome to the Eye on the U podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Hurricanes podcast. I'm David Wilson and I'm joined as always on the other line. She is out in the Pacific Northwest, parts unknown, grizzly man country. It is Susan Miller-Degnan, our Hurricanes beat writer here at the Herald. Susan, it's the bye week. You're taking it a little easy before it really ramps up next week with the ACC play starting Georgia Tech, who's coming off a good win against Wake Forest. And then it really ramps up after that with a bunch of big games in a row. First of all, how's your bye week going so far?
Bye week is fantastic. Yes, it is.
Could be your last break for quite some time because Miami looks awesome right now. The ACC is much more wide open than we expected coming into the year. Clemson already with 2 losses now after just Clemsoning away a game against Florida State. Now they go up to the Carrier Dome and to face the big bad orange of Syracuse. But we're not here to talk about Clemson or Florida State or Syracuse or any of these other ACC teams. We're here to talk about the 4-0 Miami Hurricanes. 4-0 for the first time since 2017, when, of course, they got all the way up to number 2 in the country, went to the ACC championship for so far the only time in their history. And not just 4-0, right? Like you could go for a lot of teams are 4-0 right now, and they're beating up on bad schedules or squeaking out uglier wins than they should. Miami's not had a bad moment pretty much all season, other than the first, quarter of the Texas A&M game. They go up to Temple this weekend and just roll the Owls, take care of business. We don't have to dwell too much on that. What we do want to do is kind of give our 4 biggest takeaways from the first 4 games of the season at the bye week. Obviously, things will change. Miami will probably get some guys back next week after missing a bunch of guys from injuries the last 2 weeks. But first of all, just what's kind of like your biggest takeaway from the Temple game?
They could play in any kind of conditions. I don't know if that's the biggest takeaway, but it's definitely a takeaway.
It was something you could learn, I guess, that we didn't necessarily know before.
And I'm not talking about fans because I think there were more Miami fans than Temple fans. There were many fans there, but the weather was, the rain was not torrential. It was, but the wind was really bad. Okay. There were very high gusts, and you could see the goalposts were like literally swaying all over the place. It was pretty interesting actually to watch. And, according to Tyler, it was a lot worse playing in it as far as throwing the football and stuff. It was difficult. Also another takeaway for me is that they could play any caliber team, and they're not they're staying true to what they say. They're kind of taking it week by week, it seems. They're focusing really well, it seems, on each game. There's so many takeaways. It's another takeaway. Their defense and offense are good. They're really, they can run, they can pass. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I think saw glimpses. I mean, I think so much of the story of this season was told in the first 2 weeks, right? Where week 1 they ran all over Miami of Ohio, who I honestly have no idea how Miami of Ohio was doing now, but I think they were a bowl team last year. Not an absolutely terrible team. Ran all over them, like nothing, no doubt about that game. Basically, after the first 15 minutes, it was clear. And then of course, the next week, Texas A&M, they throw all over them. And that was a really good sign at the moment. Like you said, it when you play in a game where the conditions aren't great for Tyler Van Dyke, who right now looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the country again. You have other ways to win. But that transitions. Or you got one more thing?
Yeah, it's kind of what you were saying just now, and I was saying they ran for
Yeah.
323 yards. 323 yards. I mean, yeah, it's hard to prep for Miami. They can do a lot. Miami can do a lot. They seem pretty good,
Yeah.
but they seem very good actually. But again, here comes the harder part of the schedule. So
Right.
lots of good things so far this season.
Yeah. And I think first on the list is Tyler Van Dyke. And
Yes,
that it's the first takeaway, I think, from the first 4 games of the year. In some ways, he was the biggest question mark on the roster coming into the season, not because I think we both believed that he was going to be good, but he was the guy whose ceiling, like he was the guy who had the chance to elevate this team in a way that no other individual player could if he got back
exactly.
to his ceiling, which, he looks every
Yes,
bit like the guy we saw, and maybe even better, honestly, than the guy we saw 2 years ago when Miami, how many in a row did they win when he took over? It was like 6 in a row, 7 in a row. To I think it was 7 in a row, right? Or 6, whatever. He won a bunch of games in a row, beat a bunch of
right.
ranked teams. And he looks every bit as good as he did that year. And that's the most important thing we've learned from these first 4 games, that Tyler Van Dyke is, you know, 6 weeks ago, we were talking about some of these preseason all ACC teams coming out, and he was nowhere near the first, second,
Oh,
third teams.
for
It
sure.
was, all about Jordan Travis, all about Drake May, and to a huge extent, those guys are still Heisman contenders, but Tyler is not. He's in that same class as those guys
Right.
so far.
And is off. I mean, we always say it, but it's a package. His offensive line has been
Yes,
outstanding. Okay,
the running
so
game is great.
the
The
running game,
receivers
yeah,
are playing much better than we expected.
exactly. His receivers are doing great. His offensive line is amazing, and altogether, Van Dyke is, fourth, well, entering the week. You know how when these guys play during the week, everything changes a bit, but started out the week fourth nationally in passing efficiency. And I think I read somewhere that Pro Football Focus rated him the top quarterback in the nation, probably efficiency wise or whatever, I guess, whatever formula they use. Fourth nationally in passing efficiency, seventh in completion percentage. He's almost 75% completion rate, ninth in passing touchdowns, 27th in passing yards per completion, 34th in passing yards. I mean, and remember, 34th in passing yards, but they 323 yards rushing. It just doesn't matter at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And he's thrown, by the way, only one interception this season in the opener. That's it.
Yeah. And that was pretty early in the opener. I mean, that was still when the jury was out on what Tyler was going to be like. And it was, not a great throw he made. And yeah, since then, can you even remember him
timing.
Can you even remember him making a mistake since then? Like
right.
taking a bad sack or a
thing
terrible overthrow or a dropped interception. He's
he
been
has
pretty spotless.
He has time.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
has
that's huge,
time.
obviously.
Yeah. So I'm with you. Tyler is definitely one of the differences, a big difference. The biggest.
And I think going hand in hand with that, you talked about the offensive line. We talked about the running game, but the other thing I think my number 2 takeaway, to group them together, not necessarily ranking them, but Tyler's definitely number 1, and number 2 to group together with it is the offense. The offense, I mean, that's so vague or so broad to say the offense, but I mean the scheme, the play calling, the system. I guess Shannon Dawson would be the way to if you want to really boil it down, because a lot of, we went through every position just 2 minutes ago and talked about how the O-line has been as good as we imagined. The wide receivers have been better than we imagined. The running backs have been better than we imagined. So much of that obviously traces back to Shannon Dawson. Just putting guys in much better positions to succeed than they were last year, especially with regards, I think, to the wide receivers. I think the running game has been really good, and a lot of that has to do with the offensive line, and the offensive line has a lot to do with talent acquisition more so than I think scheme. But the passing attack, getting back to where it was a couple of years ago, so much of that I think is scheme and the way that Tyler fits in that scheme, obviously, as well.
Yeah, and by the way, Tyler did not get sacked for I think it was the first time that the O-line gave up 0 sacks, no sacks, this past game against Temple. So just you know, in every way, that offense is clicking, as Tyler would say, is clicking. The offense is clicking. So, I mean, and you know, I know we didn't say this because we didn't know this till after this game, but it's the first time since 2002 when they played it for the national championship. That was the Ohio State game. That Miami has scored at least 38 points or something like that, or average a game for the first 4 games. 2002. So not only was it a very good year until the end, but it was a prolific year. Their offense was amazing that year. So all things pointing up.
Yeah, I'll say, like, it is nice if you're a Miami fan that last year, I mean, think of how many bad Miami offenses have you watched, even when the team was good, I guess, or competent. A lot of bad Miami offenses, assuming this keeps going, and I don't see any reason why this offense is not going to keep rolling. 3 out of the last 4 years, they've had awesome offenses. Last year is really an outlier now because the 2 Rhett Lashlee seasons, first the one with De'Aaron King during the COVID year, and then obviously the one where De'Aaron gets hurt and Tyler takes over. Those were 2 great offenses. And now Miami's got another one, and that's the way it should be in South Florida when you look at the skill, talent all around. And Miami obviously has gotten a lot of grief, I think, for not recruiting the wide receiver position super well, considering some of the guys who have come out of here, out of South Florida in the last 5-10 years. I mean, you look how many former Alabama and Ohio State receivers are there who are like South Florida guys that are playing in the NFL now? Colby Young's not from down here, but Xavier Restrepo is a local guy. Jacoby George is a local guy. Some of the, obviously a lot, Ray Joseph, who had some good moments on Saturday, and I'm sure will kind of have his moments in bigger games, a local guy. Rashard Smith, who's obviously had some good moments this year as a local guy. So yeah, like, would it be better if they were getting, Calvin Ridley and Jerry Jeudy and Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis to come?
Okay, they'll come.
But it's a nice reminder that the talent of Miami, like there was no excuse. Like, you can't just say, oh, they need to recruit better. Like, there was no excuse. There was talent in the program. They just kind of needed a better offensive system to get the most out of it. I mean, like Mike Harley, right? Like he was kind of like a nothing, like a fine receiver for most of his career. And then Rhett Lashlee shows up and, he becomes an NFL, not like he's playing on Sundays, but he's in the NFL orbit out of that. Like the coaches, 2 of the last 3 offensive coordinators they've have, I think, like, wiped away the myth that like there's like Miami just needs to get the 5-star receivers. Like, a lot of teams are really good with 4-star receivers. Miami would obviously be better if they had a bunch of 5-star receivers, and like you said, trending in the right direction, but the talent has always been there, and it's good to see a coach like playing to the strengths, right? Like, Miami's got smaller receivers, but they've got a system that makes it fine.
Great. So we're good with the offense, right?
We're good. The offense, I mean, that's been like, thank God, right? Because a bad offense is not like that in a college football game where those games take 3.5 hours when you're going 3 and out over and over again. That really gets people restless. So,
but to segue into the next thing that's impressive is is the other side of the ball, which we, which is impressive.
Yeah, and I think again, like not just be broad and say, oh, the defense is a big takeaway. They look good.
That's the rushing defense, number 2 in the country. They're number 2.
Yeah.
In rushing defense. That is really impressive. They're allowing now it's skewed by some of the like Bethune-Cookman and all.
I always say this time of the year, like you can say yes, they play Bethune-Cookman, but everyone has pretty much played FCS team at this point, right?
Oh,
like,
that's true. That is, David, that's true. But they're allowing 48 rushing yards a game. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean they pretty much shut down A&M. Amari Daniels had an okay game in that game, and they still forced a fumble on him, right? So like to me, the to get a little bit more specific with the defense is the like soundness of it. And this again goes back to I think some points we've made early in the year. Like, I mean, Miami's defense last year was not its biggest problem. It wasn't good, but it wasn't its biggest problem. But it's impossible not to think about the Middle Tennessee game and
give up big plays.
They give up big plays over and over. The tackling
for the
was
last
bad.
several years. They've give up some really important big play,
and that just hasn't been an issue this year. And now maybe they haven't played an offense. Like we'll see. They're going to play Florida State and even Clemson and obviously North Carolina, and maybe those teams will pick them apart. But again, Middle Tennessee last year had a 98-yard touchdown against them. Like that hasn't happened through 4 games this year.
Oh, their tackling is much better. I know Corey Couch really whiffed on one this last game. And he talked to us and he said he's going to get right to the film room. I mean, that was a kind of an ugly one, but last game. But then he ends up after that, on the same drive, he ends up intercepting the ball in the end zone. When they were driving down, which was kind of nice for him. So he kind of made it up for it that way. He had 2 interceptions in the game. And that stuff's contagious. I mean, and that gives them confidence. So, Corey now is going after every pick he can. He's more confident. Just their defense, we've talked about this, the rotation at defensive line. They've Akeem Mesidor, the starting defensive end, has missed the last 2 games, I think. Branson Dean missed the last 2 games at defensive tackle. These are starters, right? And the guys, and actually that segues into the third.
I do want to close out, I guess, on just the bigger picture of the defense is they're going to get better, right? Akeem Mesidor is going to get back. Cameron Kinch is going to get back.
Guys, but more guys are getting playing time that are younger and they're inexperienced, and they're getting better.
The defense, I mean, I harped on it, I think, last week. The depth is, I think, a really big deal. They on
the D-line.
The D-line and in the secondary and linebacker, like everywhere. Like they don't have the stars necessarily on that side of the ball. Like, again, I think Leonard Taylor's an NFL pretty high pick. Certainly Cam Kinchins, James Williams. I still, someone's going to take him pretty high. Like, Francisco Mauigoa is a kind of like breakout star, but for the most part, they don't have weak links on the defense usually, which has been, I think, when you give up big plays, it's a total breakdown, but a lot of times it's just a guy gets run past, right? Or a guy misses a tackle and all of a sudden there's a huge hole. Like the depth, I think, mitigates a lot of that stuff that has really hampered Miami for the last couple of years. And as you alluded to, they're going to keep developing depth. And that brings me to our 4th takeaway before we wrap up this miniature episode of the Eye on the U podcast. And that is talk about the young guys in general, but I think we got to start with Ruben Bain, who is probably the guy other than Tyler Van Dyke we've talked about most on this show since the start of the season. But he has earned it. Obviously, it's the bye week, so people are scraping for content across the Canes internet A lot of pro football focus watching from fans and media outlets alike. And the
Right.
nice thing, I don't buy too much into pro football focus, especially for college football. There's too many teams. Too many teams are doing different things. It's not like the NFL where everyone's running basically the same thing and you can watch and really compare. But it's nice when your eye test, the stuff most of us are watching because we're not all watching the all 22. It's nice when your eye test of what you see on Saturday or on Monday when you rewatch the game or whatever. It's nice when that matches up with what the people who are really like diving deep on the film see. And that is the case certainly with Tyler Van Dyke, who's way up in those PFF rankings. And also the case with Ruben Bain, who is through 4 weeks the number 1 ranked freshman defensive lineman.
Highest graded true freshman defensive lineman in the country. That's pretty impressive. Put it that way. So he's the guys. We've said it 100 times. There's no way the coaches would have been going nuts about him to us, vocally all the time, if he wasn't really good. And he's lived up to the hype, which is really nice.
It's been he's been everything I think people could have possibly expected. And again, like, it's not super surprising because he's kind of, they've got, I think, a really good role for him, right? Where he is, I don't know what his average snaps per game is, but, he's not starting for the most part, although he has started, with Mesidor out. He really, he doesn't have to be perfect, and I'm sure he's made mistakes because all freshmen make mistakes. But the defense, as we said, as a whole, has just been better this year. And when you play fewer snaps, your mistakes are limited, and you really those highlights stand out more. And then the other thing is just like, again, I watched him play. I wonder how many games I watched him play in high school, like 25 probably across his 4 years, and he was a 4-year starter at Miami Central, and like, just the exact same player he was basically since his freshman year at Miami Central, when he had, I think, like 11 sacks as a freshman there. Like, he's been the same guy from like every time I watch him. And the thing about him is so much of it is just effort and just like reaction time, quick. He's really quick getting off the ball, and he's not the flashiest pass rusher, right? He's not like throwing guys out of the way or spinning around guys or ducking under guys. He's just, he gets started quicker than the offensive lineman does, and he works harder, kind of like he never gives up on him. It's a little, they're very different. Reminds me a little bit of Greg Rousseau, where it was just like, it was never flashy with Greg Rousseau, but he was so big and he just like never gave up on plays, and he had those long arms, obviously. Ruben's different because he's, I don't know, 5 inches shorter, but the way that he's like, it's not flashy at all with him. It's like lunch pail mentality.
Yeah, totally agree on everything. He's just smart and strong.
And the IQ is important too. Like that's really the reason I think the coaches were raving. Is him and Ray Joseph were kind of the two guys, right? And those are probably the two, Ray, the two standout freshmen, other than Francis Mauigoa, have been Bain and Fletcher. But like Ray is clearly, like, they still love him. They give him opportunities, right? Like even against Texas A&M, I think he had a touch. Like, this freshman class, we've said it a lot. It's the real deal. They've got, I don't know, at least half a dozen guys who look like NFL players in this group.
Yeah. And by the way, I think one thing I thought of after we talked before was that Emory Williams has now played in I think all 4 games. And
did he play against A&M? I don't think he did. But either way, 3. I think
maybe he didn't. Maybe he has one more game.
Yeah, I think he played in 3.
Maybe you're right. So then he would have one more game to play. It certainly appears to me that they're going to blow his red shirt. I think they're going to. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
they're at least not concerned about it, right? Like,
yeah, but I think if Tyler Van Dyke is this good, they're gonna.
Well,
Well,
yes.
it depends. Now they're going to play Tyler more and more, but I don't think they're going to want to keep him in. If UM has big leads,
Right. Yeah.
big enough. Okay. I mean, Mario's going to make sure, but you don't want him to get hurt.
Yeah. But again, we're going into ACC schedule, and like the blowouts happen a little less free. I know like Virginia is terrible and Boston College is terrible, but like there's still ACC games. Like very rarely are you going to just like roll through your conference competition. At least Miami hasn't done that ever. Like how many like 35-point wins have they had in conference play since joining the ACC? It's probably pretty low number. But yeah, I mean they're clearly not concerned about potentially blowing his red shirt, because I think they think, like you said, I mean, one, they don't want to play Tyler because they don't want to get hurt, but Tyler Van Dyke's not going to be Miami's quarterback next year, almost certainly at this point. So Emory Williams could be the starter. He'll certainly be competing for that starting job next year, unless either Tyler surprisingly comes back or they get a transfer. But they like, it's a good sign that Emory Williams won that backup job, just in terms of what they think about him. Maybe not the best sign for Ja'Cory Brown, and the optimism around him, but definitely a good sign for Emory Williams' optimism.
Yes. Yep. And before we go, we should let people know, they probably know already if they're big UM fans, that they're breaking out the all black Knights uniforms.
Yep, Miami Knights.
Georgia.
Yep, 8:00 kickoff
Knights
against Georgia Tech.
8 p.m. kickoff.
They didn't wear them last year, right? Remember they announced they were going to wear them, and then they didn't. So
they're the same uniforms. Same.
Oh, right, because they never.
Yeah,
they never
they're
used them
using
last
the
year.
same uniforms.
Yes.
Yep. So, and they also talked about a whiteout. Some season ticket holders were saying that I think
the Clemson game, right?
Yeah. So I don't like that.
No,
just go with your Mario's real traditional. Maybe with Adidas, maybe they have contracts that they have to do certain things. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, all black should be fun. 8:00 at night, a little bit late, but I'm sure it's good for Hard Rock Stadium. It's good for the University of Miami will get more fans.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would guess, they come back after the bye, Georgia Tech, they're 4-0, blowing out everyone. Night game. I would think the crowd's going to be pretty good for that Saturday night. So,
yeah, for sure.
Things looking up for the Canes, as we've said for the last couple of weeks. Anyway, thanks as always for listening. You can follow Susan on Twitter at @SMillerDegnan. She'll be back down in Coral Gables on Monday. Presumably, I guess we don't know for sure, but that's always Mario and the coordinators talk. And then it'll be right back at it for the next 3 months plus, as we are into ACC schedule. And maybe beyond for these Hurricanes, who certainly look like a contender to make the ACC championship game this year. Follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. Thanks as always for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week.